What inspired me to choose this topic? Well, I have experienced deliverance when I was praying in tongues a number of times. And for me, I was in a place where at least I could understand what was happening to me. But then I know that there are people who are praying in tongues, but then they are not in a position or they are not in a place where there is someone who can explain to them when they experience deliverance when they are praying in tongues. And so it may come out as something strange and may even discourage them from praying in tongues. So for that reason, I decided to make this video. So why is it important for you to know how praying in tongues delivers you? Well, when you pray in tongues, sooner or later, you are going to experience deliverance because this is something that happens to everyone who prays in tongues. So it is best for you to know so that at least when you start experiencing deliverance, or if you have already experienced it but you really didn't know, at least you can now know what was happening to you. Because when you have knowledge, at least you will be more comfortable to go through the experience of deliverance when you are praying in tongues. My name is Augustine. This channel is Men Must Pray. On this channel, I talk about praying in tongues. So if you are interested in praying in tongues, if you are passionate about praying in tongues, of course, you're welcome to subscribe to this channel if you are not already subscribed. This channel also relies on your donations. I use your donations to run this setup, this entire work. So you can always send your donation to support this work. I will greatly appreciate it. Thank you for all of you who have been sending donations so far. I've been able to run this work smoothly. I am grateful. The details of how you can donate, I will leave them on the screen as well as in the description. So let me begin by describing to you how it feels to be delivered when you're praying in tongues. It is important for you to know how it feels to be delivered when praying in tongues, because this is something you will experience if you pray in tongues, or you have already experienced if you have been praying in tongues for a while. Now, anytime you go to pray in tongues and you have a fruitful praying in tongues session, you will come out of there feeling a lot lighter and a lot more peace. Now, the bondages that we usually have, they are burdens. The Bible tells us even how Jesus was speaking to us in Matthew 11:28. He was saying, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavily laden, I will give you rest." Now, in the spiritual realm, when you have burdens and you are under like some bondage, you literally have chains on you, have weights that are tied on you. And so those chains that have been tied to your spirit, of course, they make you feel heavy. And then in the physical realm, it will translate with things being very difficult. So you usually just find it difficult to get any kind of success in anything you do. And this difficulty occurs because your spirit is pulling a lot of weight. And so most of the spiritual strength that God has given you, it goes on pulling those heavy weights that the enemy has put on you. But now when you pray in tongues and you are delivered, what happens is that those weights are lifted from you, and what happens is that you feel a lot lighter. So if you have ever gone to pray in tongues and came out of there feeling very light and feeling very relieved and very refreshed, that was because what? Your burdens have been lifted, and that bondage that you were in before has now been removed. So how do you know that you are being delivered when you are praying in tongues? Well, this is something that I experienced myself before. And like what I said before, at least for me, there were people who are explaining these things that were happening to us. So it was easy for me to know that I was undergoing deliverance by praying in tongues. So usually, deliverance through praying in tongues happens in a number of ways. And usually it has physical manifestations. Some of these physical manifestations can actually be a little scary. So there are people who will vomit, because I've actually seen that. I've seen actually people who are being delivered and they were vomiting a lot. Others were just spitting, and others were rolling on the floor. Others were screaming. I've also seen others who are like rubbing themselves. Some of them were rubbing their foreheads, others were rubbing their stomach. But then there was just a lot of aggressive kind of rubbing. Just the same way somebody takes a shower. You see the way you usually take a shower and scrub yourself. Basically, that is what they were doing when they were praying in tongues. So it usually depends on the kind of bondage that someone is suffering. Sometimes there are people who are tied with chains. So for those kind of people, you'll see them kind of striking those chains when they are praying in tongues. So you'll just find that there is just a constant hunger and desire for you to just kind of keep pushing on something. So usually it is the Holy Spirit leading you with those prophetic acts of just hammering on those chains to break them and be set free. Then, of course, people who are possessed by demons or evil spirits, what will usually happen is that some of those evil spirits will actually start coming out. So that's why those kind of people, they may end up screaming a lot when they're praying in tongues. So a number of people have come to me and told me that they were screaming a lot anytime they would pray in tongues, and they couldn't understand why. Because for them, they will just start praying in tongues normally, and then after praying in tongues for a short while, they will just start screaming all of a sudden. So what happens is that when you start praying in tongues, the Holy Spirit charges you up and he lights a fire in you, and because that fire starts burning out any evil spirits that have that are within you, and of course it makes those evil spirits scream. So what happens is that because the evil spirits use your mouth as well as the Holy Spirit also uses your mouth, of course you can't produce two voices at the same time. So what will happen is that the screaming will usually take over the praying in tongues for a short while, and then so there will be some kind of alternation between praying in tongues and screaming. But then just know that it is normal for that to happen, and it is a process of deliverance. So when should you expect this kind of deliverance to be happening? Well, from my experience, many people experience a lot of deliverance the moment they start praying in tongues or during the early days of praying in tongues. This is usually because at that time is when the Holy Spirit is trying to clean your system, because he has just come in and now he has the power to clean your system and clean your body. So that is when he will usually try to, that is when he will start removing all the works of the enemy and breaking those chains and every other bondage that you have been suffering. And then the other time you will usually experience this is when you are having intense praying in tongues more than you have ever prayed before. Because you see, deliverance also happens in levels. So usually there is the basic deliverance from, of course, the bondages of the evil one and what. And then there is now that deliverance that comes with knowledge. So this is where you usually find there are things that you have been taught, which of course are not godly. So the Holy Spirit needs you to the Holy Spirit needs to deliver you from those kind of teachings. So what will happen is that he will come and remove that knowledge from you as he gives you new knowledge. So that kind of deliverance, of course, it is a continuous kind of deliverance, because the amount of knowledge that we consume that is not of God is a lot. So at the end of the day, there is a lot of information that the Holy Spirit has to get out of us. So for this one, I have seen most people, sometimes they pray and they start scratching their head, or they just feel their head is burning, or they feel some kind of fire on their head. So usually it is the Holy Spirit just removing the wrong information and the ungodly information that you have received, so that he may give you that godly information that you actually need. So apart from just expecting these kind of deliverances to happen when you start praying in tongues, you can also expect them to be happening once in a while when you are just praying in tongues, because sometimes you get defiled along the way, and the Holy Spirit may need to just remove something from you that is, of course, not of God. So how exactly does the Holy Spirit deliver you when you are praying in tongues? Just as I explained before, the Holy Spirit usually, he causes a fire to burn in you. And you see that fire, of course, it consumes what? Every manner of evil that is within you. And so sometimes the amount of evil that is in us is too much, or it's a lot that cannot be consumed in one session. Because you see, you also have to be in a position whereby your body can handle what? The power of the Holy Spirit. Because you see, the Holy Spirit has the power to kick out every evil in one go. But you see, that will mean that he has to apply so much aggression to kick out all that evil. And that aggression may just be too much even for your body to handle. So it may end up actually doing what? Like causing you harm. This is why usually the Holy Spirit will do it progressively. So he will start by removing the very basic, like the foundational bondages. And then the more you pray in tongues, the more he continues delivering you from other minor issues as you go. So you have to understand that it is partly your responsibility to create a good environment for the Holy Spirit to remove the chaff that is within you. And at the same time, you have to understand that not everything can be removed in one go. In the Bible, there is that mention of how the children of Israel were entering Canaan. And the Bible tells us that God chose to give the land of Canaan to the Israelites step by step. And he would not just drive out all the Canaanites at once, lest evil beasts come and inhabit the land. So that is also exactly what happens with our spirits. So just like the land of Canaan, when the Holy Spirit comes in us, he doesn't occupy everything in one go. Usually what happens is that he begins by settling at the very center of our lives because we have welcomed him. Then from that place, that's when he will now start operating to clean every other area as he goes. So you have to be prayerful and continue praying in tongues for this deliverance to continue happening. So the more time you spend praying in tongues, of course, the more time the Holy Spirit will have to deal with delivering you and driving out things that need to be driven out. And of course, it will make your deliverance quicker as opposed to if you pray in tongues rarely. So you may be asking, what if I have not experienced any of these things and yet I pray in tongues? Well, what I know is that for people who pray in tongues, it is very unlikely that you will not experience any of these things. You will usually experience them. For people who don't experience these kind of things, the explanation that I know is that there are people who are very sensitive they are very sensitive in the spirit. There are people who are less sensitive. So it may just be that you are less sensitive in the spirit, so that even when the Holy Spirit is actually delivering you, you don't actually get those things like the spiritual manifestations, you don't get them physically. So that is what I may say, because there are people who don't necessarily experience this kind of deliverance acts or necessarily feel like they are being delivered. But then the surest way to know that the Holy Spirit is actually delivering you when you pray in tongues is, of course, you will usually feel lighter after you pray in tongues, and you will feel peace after you pray in tongues. So if you do pray in tongues and feel peace and feel light after praying in tongues, then you know that the Holy Spirit has actually delivered you, even if you did not really experience any kind of physical manifestations. So in conclusion, I have witnessed a number of deliverances when people are praying in tongues. One of them, there was a certain girl. She was being prayed for. Of course, she was praying in tongues. Then, of course, she was also being prayed for deliverance. And of course, this girl just began kind of scrubbing her forehead and kind of pulling things from her hands. And basically, she was you'll feel like she was actually removing things from her body, even though there were not any kind of things that she was removing. But you will just see like she was pulling from, like she was kind of pulling from her hands and trying to pull just many things from herself. So usually that is how deliverance happens, and that was one of the cases I saw. Another one was mostly screaming. That one, like I've seen it a lot. When people begin praying in tongues and the tongues that you are praying get intense, of course, there are people who will just fall down and start screaming, and then they will roll on the floor and all that. Because see, sometimes when people are just praying in tongues, that environment just gets so much charged up that the evil spirits just can't survive. So even if somebody was just standing there and he was not even praying in tongues, just because he's in that environment, those evil spirits just can't stand that environment. So they will just do what? Usually just scream and leave. And you see, those evil spirits, they do feel a lot of pain from what? The fire that the Holy Spirit burns. But for you, you will only feel a little sensation of that fire. So that's it for today. If you have any questions regarding deliverance and praying in tongues, you can always ask. I will leave my email on the screen. You can always send me an email and ask me if you have any follow-up question. Then I'll do my best to answer you. So that's it for today. God bless you.